Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Gates. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Beyond the Gates, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. You ever notice how when someone in town gets money, everybody suddenly has an opinion? That's what happened to me. One minute I was just Leslie, scraping by, and the next folks were whispering in diners, saying I was showing off, saying I'd burn through $1 million in no time. But what they don't know is, I wasn't out here trying to buy people's love. I was trying to save the woman who raised me. When I slid that check across the table to Peaches, her hands started shaking, and for the first time in years, she couldn't find the words. That moment wasn't about money. It was about love, loyalty, and finally being able to give back to the person who gave me everything. And while I was doing that, across town, Vanessa was breaking her kids' hearts with the worst news a mother could ever give, and Jacob was telling his best friend the kind of truth that can tear a friendship apart. This isn't gossip. This is real life in Fairmont, Crest, and it's messier, rawer, and more painful than anybody wants to admit. Leslie gives Peaches money. I've learned that money changes people. It doesn't just change the person who receives it, it changes the people around them, too. When I first came into that $1 million, I thought it was freedom. I thought it was an open door to a brighter life. A life where I didn't have to keep worrying about bills, about whether Eva would have enough to eat, about whether I'd be able to afford another month in that crumbling apartment building. But the truth is, money is just another kind of burden. It puts a target on your back, it makes people whisper when you walk into a room, and it makes you wonder if anyone's being kind to you because they actually care or because they're hoping you'll slip them a check. That's why what I did for Peaches, it wasn't charity. It wasn't guilt. It was love. Plain and simple. Let me back up a little, because this story starts before the check, before the hotel room, before Eva even knew what I had planned for her. It starts with Orphe Jeans. If you've never been there, Orphe Jeans isn't exactly the fanciest place in town. It's one of those little spots where people come less for the food and more for the gossip. The walls are yellowed from years of smoke and grease, and the smell of fried catfish clings to your clothes long after you've left. But if you want to know what's going on in Fairmont, Crest, or more specifically, who's sleeping with who's suddenly flush with cash, or who's planning to skip town, you go there. That morning I walked in, and I could already feel the eyes on me. Mona and Jan were at their usual corner booth, and I swear those two could cut through bone with the way they look at you. I didn't need to hear what they were saying to know I was the subject of their conversation. Still, they didn't even try to lower their voices when I passed by. Leslie thinks she's fancy now, Mona muttered, stirring her coffee with a spoon that looked like it had seen better days. Jan chuckled, shaking her head. Rich people don't eat at Orphe Jeans. She's just trying to show off. You'll see. Give it 6 months, she'll be broke again.
I wanted to say something.
I wanted to stop, turn, and tell them they didn't know the first thing about me or what I was doing with the money. But instead, I kept walking. I'd learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. The truth was, I wasn't living like a millionaire. My so-called new mansion wasn't even ready yet. The contractors had pushed the move-in date back again, and in the meantime, I'd been living in the hotel. Eva thought it was temporary. She thought I was waiting until the house was done. But the truth was, I had other plans. I'd bought her an apartment building. Not just any building, either, the very one where we used to live. It wasn't glamorous, and the pipes rattled like bones every time someone ran the shower, but it was home. At least it had been once. And when I signed the papers and the building was officially mine, all I could think was how I wanted Eva to feel safe there again, the way she did when she was a little girl and Peaches would come over with cornbread or fried chicken and tell her stories about back in the day. That's the thing about Peaches. She wasn't my real mama, but she may as well have been. My own mother wasn't much for tenderness. She was hard in a way that left no room for softness. But Peaches filled in the gaps. She was there when I needed a hug, when I needed advice, when I needed someone to believe in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. But lately, Peaches hadn't been doing so well. I'd heard whispers, because that's what Fairmont Crest does. It whispers before it tells you the truth, that she'd been sick. At first, I thought maybe it was just her age catching up to her. But when I went to see her, really see her, I realized it was worse than that. Her once strong hand shook when she tried to pour sweet tea. Her laugh, the one that used to fill a room like music, came out raspy and broken. And her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. "Don't look at me like that, Leslie," she said, waving her hand at me like she was swatting away the truth. "I'm fine, just a little under the weather." But I knew better. That's when I made up my mind. I called her to the hotel, told her I wanted to talk. She showed up wearing her Sunday best, like she always did, because Peaches had pride. Even when she didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, she'd make sure her shoes were polished and her lipstick was perfect. We sat down, and I slid the envelope across the table. She looked at it, then looked back at me. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it," I told her. She hesitated because Peaches hated handouts. She always had. But eventually, she pulled the flap back and her hands started shaking, not from sickness this time, but from shock. "Leslie," her voice broke. This is too much." "It's not enough," I said, my throat tightening. "You've done more for me than anybody in this world. You kept me alive when I didn't think I could make it. You took care of Eva when I couldn't. Don't you dare tell me it's too much." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she couldn't even speak. I reached across the table and took her hand, and I swear, I felt like I was 12 years old again, holding on to her for dear life. "You're gonna get the treatment you need," I whispered. "And you're not just gonna get better. You're gonna live. Because I'm not ready to lose you, Peaches. Not now, not ever." She finally nodded, squeezing my hand as tight as she could. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. After Peaches left the hotel room with the envelope tucked carefully into her purse, I just sat there for a long time, staring at the door. My chest felt tight, like I just carried something heavy up a flight of stairs, but it wasn't a physical weight. It was everything else. People think giving money away is easy. They think you just sign a check, push it across the table, and suddenly you're some kind of saint. But it's not easy. Every dollar I give away, I feel it. Not because I don't want to help, but because I know there's always going to be someone else with a need, someone else with a handout, someone else whispering in my ear, "Just a little more, Leslie." But Peaches wasn't someone else. She was family. And as she shuffled down the hallway, I felt this mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I knew she could finally afford the treatment she'd been putting off, and dread because I also knew the whispers at Orphe Jeans were about to get louder. I was right. By the time I stepped back outside later that afternoon, Mona and Jan had already added another chapter to their little soap opera. This time, they weren't whispering. They were bold, loud, and practically gleeful. "Leslie's throwing money at everybody now," Jan said, her laugh sharp as a knife. "First Eva, now Peaches. Who's next?" "You watch," Mona replied. "She'll be flat broke by Christmas. Mark my words." I wanted to tell them to shut their mouths, but instead I bit my tongue and kept walking. Because what good would it do? They weren't really talking about me. They were talking about what they were afraid of. They were afraid of being forgotten, of being left behind, of watching someone else climb while they stayed in the same place. But Fairmont Crest wasn't just buzzing about me. Vanessa was about to shatter her children's world. I'll never forget that day. I wasn't there in the room, but I heard about it later, and when I picture it, I see every painful detail. Vanessa had been pacing her living room for over an hour, trying to figure out how to tell them. Doug's death had been sudden, brutal, and unfair. And how do you explain something like that to a child? How do you tell them their daddy's not coming home? She tried to keep her voice steady, but it cracked anyway. She sat them down, brushed the hair back from her youngest's face and said, "Baby, Daddy's gone. He was in an accident." The silence that followed was unbearable. One child stared blankly at the floor, another burst into tears, and the oldest just kept asking, "When's he coming back?" There's no script for grief. No way to package it neatly, no way to soften the blow. And Vanessa carried that weight like a stone in her chest, even as Nicole hovered nearby, trying not to cry herself. Nicole was tough, sharp, the kind of woman who prided herself on not letting anything shake her. But that day she admitted she wanted to wash her eyes out, like somehow she could erase what she'd seen and heard. And while Vanessa's world was crumbling, across town, Jacob and Derek were lifting weights, like the world was normal. Except it wasn't. Jacob's eyes had that haunted look, the look of a man keeping a secret so big it threatened to split him in half. Derek, on the other hand, was sweating bullets, not just from the workout, but from the guilt. Because his legs, they weren't as useless as he'd been pretending. He'd been feeling the stirrings of life again, the kind of progress that could change everything. But instead of telling Ashley, the woman who'd been by his side through every sleepless night and doctor's appointment, he'd chosen silence. And Jacob? Jacob wasn't having it. "I'm not gonna lie for you anymore," Jacob said, dropping the weights onto the floor with a thud. "Ashley deserves the truth. Naomi deserves the truth. Hell, you deserve the truth." Derek's face flushed red. "You don't understand, man. If I tell her too soon, if I get her hopes up and then it all falls apart." "No," Jacob snapped. "Don't feed me that. This isn't about protecting Ashley. This is about you testing her. About you wondering if she really loves you enough to stay, even if you never walk again. And let me tell you something. You don't walk into a marriage with a lie that big. You just don't." The room went quiet. Derek clenched his fists, trying to hold onto his anger. But deep down, he knew Jacob was right. Still, pride is a stubborn thing, and instead of admitting it, he just muttered, "If I make major progress, I'll tell her. Until then, you keep your mouth shut." Jacob didn't answer. He just shook his head, grabbed his water bottle, and left. But the silence between them said more than words ever could. Meanwhile, Andre was making his own kind of mess. He showed up at the hospital, nervous as hell, ready to tell Ashley the truth, that he and Danny had gotten married. But the second he opened his mouth, he realized Ashley already knew. And worse, she was wearing Derek's engagement ring. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," Andre stammered. "It's not what it looks like." Ashley crossed her arms, her eyes cold. "It looks exactly like what it is." Desperate, he tried to explain, tried to make her see. "You and Derek? That's your comfort zone. That's safe. But you and me, we were meant for more than safe." She shook her head. "I love Derek." And just like that, the door slammed shut. But if Andre was fumbling, Joey was the one pulling strings. That man always had a way of making people feel like puppets, whether they realized it or not. Marcel thought he could skip town, head off to the Caribbean, and leave the mess of Doug's death behind him. But Joey? Joey wasn't about to let that happen. "You leaving now?" Joey said, leaning back in his chair at the casino, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers. "That's gonna look real bad, Marcel. Real bad. Cop skips town right after a man dies? People are gonna start asking questions." Marcel shifted uncomfortably. I need space." Joey grinned, but there was no humor in it. "What you need is to sit tight and play the part. Let me handle the rest." And just like that, Marcel was trapped. But Joey's manipulation didn't stop there. Vanessa, raw and broken, had agreed to meet Nicole at Uptown to talk about Doug's death. Joey showed up, too, slick as ever, offering to drive Vanessa to see her son.
For a moment she almost said yes.
Almost let herself lean on him. But she caught herself, reminded herself that Nicole had already promised to take her. Still, Joey lingered, and when Vanessa broke down, he wrapped his arms around her. And that's when Nicole walked in. The look on her face when she saw them, it was a mix of betrayal, disgust, and something deeper. Something that said she already knew Joey's hands weren't clean. The walls of Fairmont Crest were closing in on all of us, piece by piece. Secrets, lies, money, grief. It was all tangled together like a web, and every time one of us tried to pull free, the threads only tightened.
"And me?"
I kept hearing Peach's voice in my head. "Don't let money make you forget who you are, Leslie." I was trying. God help me, I was trying.